reach out to us, and we'd love to get you plugged in. So we have also just a quick plug for our scorecard, which you can find at environmentalcaucus.com/scorecard, where you can find how our legislators voted on particular issues. So to highlight some of our champions, such as Rita Harris and Anna Eskamani, great climate leaders in our particular area in Orange County. And you all can also check out who we've endorsed in this upcoming election to help guide you when you are making decisions about who to vote for. So be sure to check that out. Also, if you have any ideas on what kind of events you would like to see from us, please fill out this survey. So we have a Google form and also a QR code that leads to that Google form. So we'd love to hear from you on what your interests are. All right. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Chuck to give us his presentation on Note 2. So here I'm changing the host to Chuck. So go ahead, Chuck.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. I am going to pull up now, hopefully, a PowerPoint presentation. Can everyone see that? Can anyone see that? You can. Okay, great. Well, my name is Chuck O'Neill, and I'm chairman of the Noted2.org political committee that was set up specifically to defeat Amendment 2 on November 5th of this year. So what is Amendment 2? It was a legislative joint resolution to put onto the ballot an amendment that's called the right to hunt and fish, or fish and hunt, as they like to call it. And what would it do? What it would do is it would insert language into Article 1 of the Florida Constitution. So as you can see of the screenshot of the Florida Constitution, Article 1 is a Declaration of Rights. So this particular amendment would insert in the Declaration of Rights a right to hunt and fish. Now, what are the fundamental rights in the Florida Constitution under Article 1? We have political power, basic rights, religious freedom, freedom of speech and press, freedom to assemble, freedom to work, right to bear arms, due process. These are the absolute most fundamental rights that a citizen has in the state of Florida. And in here, they would like to put a right to hunt. Now, one of the reasons why this is so dangerous is this supersedes statutory law. By inserting it into the Florida Constitution as a fundamental right, it comes in at a hierarchy above Florida statute. So a Florida statute that conflicts with a fundamental constitutional right, the fundamental constitutional right would supersede that. Now, let's look at how it got here. There are 4 ways to amend the Florida Constitution. The first way, and the way this is coming in, is a joint resolution by the Florida legislature. It has to pass by 60%. It passed overwhelmingly. If you talk to any legislators who voted on this, they'll tell you it really did not get a whole lot of it was not really looked at very well. Okay, they read the title. There's so many bills going through. They say, okay, that sounds good. Right to hunt and fish. One legislator said, why are we doing this? Do we need a right to play tennis in the Florida Constitution? They voted for it anyhow. There was only one dissenting vote, and that came from Senator Book, who voted against it. The second way, and the way that most of us understand constitutional amendments coming in, is through citizens' initiative. They would have had to get 866,000 signatures to get this on the ballot. They didn't do that. They went through this legislative way, and we have to deal with it. The other two you rarely ever see happen. The Constitutional Revision Commission, that comes up every 20 years. That's how the Florida Wildlife Commission was created. But again, that's only every 20 years. The fourth one you hardly ever see coming through the Taxation and Budget Reform Commission. So originally, the language as proposed to put this in the Florida Constitution said, hunting and fishing shall be preserved in perpetuity as a public right. This section does not limit the authority granted to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under Section 9 of Article 4, and it does not limit or restrict any law relating to trespass, property rights, or eminent domain. So keep this in mind, and this is what actually passed, and I highlighted this section. So it says fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife. Fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife, including by the use of traditional methods, shall be preserved forever as a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. And then in the bottom, they deleted the language about trespassing and preserving property rights. And we'll get into more of that and the implication of that later. So the three main things and takeaway from this language: the right to fish and hunt amendment would make killing the preferred method of wildlife management. It would make hunting the preferred method. So recently, as you know, in Orlando, we had a bear. He wandered into downtown Orlando, took up residence in a tree in Lake Eola. Under this language, hunting would be the preferred method of taking care of that situation, managing wildlife. So let's say the same situation happened again. Somebody comes to Lake Eola with a gun and starts popping off shots at the bear because that is now the preferred means of managing wildlife. Well, what could happen? You have condos around there. You have children playing on the playground. You have the chance of missed shots, going errant. You have a bear getting shot in front of kids. This is not a good thing. Should not be in the Florida Constitution as the preferred means of managing wildlife. Secondly, it says that traditional methods, this would be allowed. Traditional methods. What does traditional methods mean? That is up to the courts. It's not up to you or I, and it's not up to the proponents of this amendment. I've heard and read where they say, oh, well, traditional methods are the currently legal methods for taking wildlife. Well, that's not what they said. That's not what the language says. It doesn't say currently legal. It says traditional. So what are traditional methods? Traditional methods, leg hold traps. In the case of bears, you have baiting, hunting with dogs, things like that. So it brings in all these things that can be shown by a defendant, if charged, that this is a traditional method. This was used in the 1800s. This was used in the 1700s. There's no limit on what traditional methods means by virtue of this amendment. And thirdly, because they took out the section that was originally in there that preserved trespassing and private property rights, the reservation for that, because that was taken out, courts look in the construction of how this amendment was created, what they considered, and what they tossed out. And in this case, they tossed out the private property rights element. So if someone, let's say you have 5 acres, an acre, 10 acres, someone is chasing an animal with dogs, etc., across your property, and they can do because you have that. I'm sorry if it cut out there, but you have very little rights to protect your private property from hunters hunting on your property, shooting animals on your property. Did you want to admit, oh, here, let me admit a couple people here that have been waiting, I guess because I'm the host. Okay, welcome. So this is why we say just say no to 2. Since 2010, the NRA has gotten 12 states to pass a right to hunt constitutional amendment with an average approval rate of 79%. This is huge. People, when they're looking at this and they read just the ballot title and they don't read the actual substance of it, and they don't have any familiarity with what the implications of the substance of the amendment is, they generally vote yes. Now, where have we seen since 2010 a change in that? In 2018, North Carolina passed this similar amendment by 57%. If that was in Florida, it would not have passed because, as we all know, you need 60% for a constitutional amendment to pass in the state of Florida. So what was the difference between the 79% and the 57%? In North Carolina, the opposition was able to gain the support of the Democratic Party of North Carolina. That was the big factor. And that's why I'm so excited to talk with you all today and so appreciative that the Democratic Environmental Caucus has voted to join us in opposition to this amendment. Hopefully, over the course of the next 95, 98 days of this campaign, we will be able to get onto the voter guides in different counties where they recommend how people vote so that they vote no on this particular amendment. So what are the keys to defeating Amendment 2 as we see? We've been running a Facebook targeting advertising, targeting mostly women and Democrats. This is from past campaigns that have been run in opposition to this amendment in 2010. This amendment was defeated in Arizona, and we have spoken with Wayne Pacelli, who at that time was the executive director of the Humane Society of the United States, who, in addition with Sierra Club, was largely responsible for defeating the amendment. And he has told us, after running 60 different campaigns, to put constitutional amendments on the ballot and defeat constitutional amendments, that the key to winning is Democrats and women. And that is what we're focused on here. Word of mouth, shared post, letters to the editor, any way that you can get people to look past the ballot title. That's the important thing, to get people to think about it. And if they don't want to think about it and they don't want to read the summary, then just skip it, right? If they don't understand it, skip it. But what we would like for you all to do is to educate the people in your sphere of influence that the language that's in this amendment is dangerous to Florida, to Floridians, to private property rights, and to our wildlife. Also, how can we expand our base is by bringing on other organizations, whether they be conservation organizations or they be animal welfare organizations or they be private property rights organizations, to get those organizations on board and have them communicate with their members to vote no on Amendment 2. To get on the Democratic voter guide, we mentioned this earlier, we have a 67 county campaign that's beginning right now to contact each of the DECs in these counties, 67 counties, to see A, if they have a voter guide, B, if they have a website to inform their Democrats in their counties as to how to vote on this. And of course, number 5, donations are always helpful. So right now I'm going to take you to our website. This is the Noted 2 website. If you go to noted2.org, here's a good quote from an organization. This dangerous and misleading amendment will strip Florida citizens of their power to protect and conserve wild animals. It's designed to trick voters into allowing some of the cruelest forms of hunting and prevent citizens, scientists, and agencies from protecting wildlife in the future. World Animal Protection says a resounding no to Amendment 2. So again, here we talk about the threat to private property rights, the threat to wildlife, and something that I have yet to mention, which is the threat to marine populations. Our legal experts have looked at this, and even though there's a gillnet ban that was put into place back in 1994 by a citizens initiative, this particular amendment, this right to hunt and fish, is in direct contravention of that. And what they're telling us is when the courts look at 2 conflicting measures that are in the Constitution, they defer to the most recent measure. So if this constitutional amendment 2 passes, this could essentially wipe out that gillnet ban. And if you're unfamiliar with gillnets and why they were banned, is they're a wall of death in the sea that kill everything that swims into them. And that could significantly affect the commercial fishing industry, the sports fishing industry in the state of Florida. So even though you may see a Florida sports fishing industry in favor of this, they really should be very much opposed to this. And several who I've talked to are already opposed to this. Now, if you go to the website, we have different articles. For instance, here is one that was written by David Guest. He's an attorney with Earth Justice. We also have an article by the Florida Bar that talks about this language and why it is so dangerous to put this in the Florida Constitution. This is, if you have time to go into reading this. We have an editorial. This is by I believe this was by the Orlando Sentinel, opposing the amendment. Here's an article by Kate McFall from HSUS. So there are all sorts of good articles in here to read and check out if you have the time. So look at this at the top, Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida. These are the organizations that say no to Amendment 2. Also, a recent addition, the Florida chapter of the Sierra Club, also standing in opposition to Amendment 2. The animal law section of the Florida Bar, Animal Wellness Action. This is Wayne Pacelli's new organization, or fairly new organization. Another chapter of Sierra Club. Wildlife for All is a great organization. They're trying to change the membership on different fish and wildlife agencies around the country. We have a charter operation, another Sierra Club group, the Save the Turtles, very, very important. They see this as a big danger to the turtle population, sea turtle population. Sierra Club of Central Florida, Sharktopia, a Center for Humane Economy, World Animal Protection, One Protest, Bear Defenders, League of Humane Voters, South Florida Wildlands Association, Dream Green, Volusia, etc. So all these organizations in opposition. Here are some graphics if you'd like to look at them. This is an interesting one. There's already a right to hunt and fish in state statute. It's already in our law. Why would we want to elevate this to a constitutional right where it cannot be modified by the legislature? This is where it belongs, in state statute, where if it needs to be modified, it can be modified without going through the constitutional amendment process. So here's the language of the amendment. And let's go over here. Just in case you're looking for it, these are the summaries of the 6 amendments that are going to appear on the November ballot. And if you're looking for an easy way to remember how to vote, I'll play this little.
If you want to know how to vote on the 6 Florida constitutional amendments in November, just remember this happy little tune.
No, no, yes, yes, no. Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Yes, yes.
If you want to.
Now, you're going to be hearing that tonight when you go to bed and when you wake up in the morning. That has a good way of getting into people's heads. So that is a cute little cartoon that we put together. Also, frequently asked questions. Please have a look at these. These are questions that may come up when you talk to people about what it is, what it's all about, why it's dangerous, why people should vote against it. A lot of good stuff in here. Catherine put almost all of this together. If you have any questions, she is the expert on the frequently asked questions. And that is, for the most of it, the end of that. I'd be glad to take any questions if you have any questions about this amendment. Don't everyone speak at once. Catherine, do you have anything to add? What's down there? Uh-oh. I've got.
So can you make me the host again, Chuck?
Oh yeah. How about that?
When I set up this Zoom meeting, I thought I made it so that our participants couldn't unmute. So I would need to set it so that you guys can get unmute. And I also have some warm-up questions for you all. So now you all can unmute. So feel free to raise your hands if you have a question. But I'll kick us off to just ice break. Chuck, there are so many states that have this constitutional amendment. What has been like the result of some states? I've heard some rumors, and I'm welcome to share like some facts that I know, but what kind of like bad things have resulted in this amendment in other states?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's if you want some specific examples, there's the last question in frequently asked questions talks about some things that have happened. One very tragic thing in North Carolina, after this passed, they opened up 94,000 acres of former sanctuary for black bears and turned that into a hunting territory for black bears. So that has been being battled out in their organizational chart, but what it's done is opened the door to hunting of animals that were previously not hunted. In Nebraska, they opened up hunting of mountain lions as something that you could do for sport there for trophy hunting. And it got out of hand. The legislature passed a law banning the hunting of mountain lions in Nebraska. But because they had passed this right to hunt in Nebraska, the governor of Nebraska vetoed the bill by saying, well, the people of Nebraska have spoken when they passed this constitutional amendment. So now you have a renewed hunting of mountain lions. And this is not based on science. It's not based on ecology. It's not based on wildlife biology. It's based on this new right to hunt, regardless of what the population of this wildlife populations is. There's cases of this influencing the hunting of wolves in the northern states, and the mandatory hunting due to the interpretation of this constitutional amendment.
Thanks for sharing that. I also heard that in Montana that legislation, they tried to enable permitting on tribal sovereignty as well.
Yes, and
Bad news.
that's a concern here as well, that are the Miccosukee and the Seminole tribes are very concerned about, is that their tribal lands would be subject to hunting from, and this is a public right. This would be a public right, so people could fly in here internationally and hunt using this new constitutional right.
Wow. Oh, Issa has his hand up. Take it
Yes.
away.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm one of the people that you endorsed.
Oh, great.
I know. Thank you so much for running. Thank you.
Well, this is my life. But listen, one of the problems that I've seen throughout the states and even some of the countries that I've been to in reference to protection of wildlife and protecting their habitat is that we don't do a very good job and telling people why this is important. I mean, we don't make any mention to anything like zoonotic diseases. We don't make any mention to why this is important to the ecosystem. I believe that if we were able to enunciate these things to the general public, we may have a stronger element of passing certain types of amendments that we need. Because, even though I read it, and Chuck, you did a tremendous job. For the general layperson, they still will not see why it's so important. And it has to be made clear. And I think as we are environmentalists, that's our duty prior to these things coming up, so that when they go to it, they say, wow, I got it. Even organizations that normally do not align with this. For example, you have civil rights groups that are in the city. They don't go out and do these things. But if they see the importance of it, they would be immediate allies to our agenda and our cause. It's just an observation. But thank you, Dr. Chuck.
You know
Thank you,
what?
Catherine.
Thank you for bringing that up, because we were just discussing this at the board meeting, is how do we distill all this down into one sentence that the average voter can understand? And I would appreciate your input and guidance as to what it is what is that one responsive chord that we could tell people about this that would resonate. To me, it's hard to see, because when you're inside of something, it's difficult to see it from the outside, right? I've been so involved in this that I look at all the components, all the dangerous language. But one of the things that I think is important to preserve for the plan is biodiversity. And we've already lost 69% of our wildlife just since 1970. And now to create this new right to speed up the loss of biodiversity, do you see that as a possibility, a possible argument?
Absolutely, I do see that. It's just the element of framing it. And once we frame it in the manner that we suggest, I think people will align to it and grab onto it. Just make it simple. I mean, we have to connect that the preservation, the conserving of wildlife and their habitat is directly connected to our life and our growth and our existence as a species. We put it very simple. They die, we misuse them, we're next.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I would like to hone that message down. If you could stay in contact with Catherine or I about this message, because if and so many of these things relate back to the person, right? In politics, what does this mean to me? Well, a loss of biodiversity, a loss of habitat is doom for us, So yeah, we're pushing them off the planet, but at the same time, we're killing the things that will enable us to sustain the planet.
Right.
So I mean, I really appreciate your comment, and I'm going to have to try to work something up that reflects what you say, because that is, especially coming from the point of an average voter, what is it that will strike a responsive chord in the average voter who's not, they're not out wildlife viewing and, birding and doing things like that. I would love to, and if you have any thoughts on how to hone that down into a message, would love it.
I will send to you my email. I think Catherine has it as well, I believe.
Yeah, Chuck, what's the best email for the No to Two org nowadays?
To send it to me or to no2.org? No2.org at gmail.com is the best. So sorry.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. So I put the email in the chat, no2.org at gmail.com for anyone of our listeners who
Okay,
would like to get connected. Thank you.
that's what Chuck and I send your mind, Chuck, to this
All right,
list.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Isa.
Awesome. I have a next question, which is, and everyone feel free to be teeing up another question for yourself, is Chuck, what is the cost to the taxpayers going to be?
If it passes, well, if you create this right to hunt, and if people come in and say, I have a right to hunt this species, I have a right to hunt that species, the Florida Wildlife Commission is going to have to set up seasons. They're going to have to set up check stations. They have to employ personnel to supervise the hunt, to weigh the animals as they come in, to take samples. Usually they extract a tooth to check the DNA of the animal that's brought in. So it's going to open up a tremendous amount of cost on the part of the Florida taxpayer to create and maintain hunts on all these different animals that people will say that they now have a right to hunt. So that's just one cost. Another cost is going to be litigation, because there are going to be inevitably groups that sue on the behalf of the public trust. These wildlife belong to the entire population of Florida. 1% of the population of Florida has a hunting permit. 99% of the population of Florida does not have a hunting permit. So the 99% are going to be paying to cater to the 1%. And when I say the 1%, yes, that is the 1% that is the kind of people who fly in here from around the world, get a hunting license to hunt our native wildlife. We're paying for these rich people to fly in to hunt our wildlife. And that is another tragedy here, is why should somebody who's shopping at A&P have to pay for some rich dude to fly in here from Europe to shoot our wildlife? It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. It doesn't make any sense. How could this amendment block policy reform in the future, do you think?
How would it block what? Policy reform?
Policy reform in the future, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, number one, when it becomes a constitutional right, you can't pass legislation that would affect the right, because the legislation is subservient to the constitutional right. So if, as we go along, for instance, you create this new right to use traditional methods, say spears, right? And somebody says, look, I have a right to spear different wildlife like black bears. I got a right to use, and that's been done before. These kind of methods cannot be adjusted through statutory means, because it becomes a constitutional right. So our ability to for the public to say, hey, this is just too barbaric. I think if you look at capital punishment, and if you were to pass an amendment that says traditional means of capital punishment is now constitutional in the state of Florida, well, look back over the years, the centuries of what capital punishment was back in the 1700s, burning at the stake. Why is it that we should bring back these barbaric methods and insert them into our Florida Constitution? again, I don't think that makes any sense.
Yeah, agreed. One final question for you. Recently, DeSantis passed HB 87, which was to basically to oversimplify, like a stand your ground against bears. What do you think of like the timing between this amendment and that bill? Do you see like any correlation, or is it just a coincidence?
Well, it's just a steady decline in, amongst fellow Democrats here. It's a steady decline in the respect for other life, right? That's really what it boils down to. That you're able, HB 87, you're able to shoot a bear. It started off, if you feel threatened, if you were in your house, a bear breaks into your house, you can shoot it. Well, you could have done that anyhow. And then it turned into, well, if you're outside of your house and you feel threatened, you can shoot that. And then it turned into, if your pet was threatened, you could shoot the bear. And then it turned into, if you're part of your property, you felt like if it broke into your screen porch, you could shoot a bear. And then it came off of your property. And now if you're in the woods and a bear attacks your dog, you can shoot the bear. If you're in the habitat of a bear, you can shoot the bear if he's threatening your dog. So it's a general diminution of a respect for life that I think is indicative of this current administration, the current thinking of the Florida legislature, and unfortunately, it's also become part of the thinking of our court system that regards private individuals' rights as being subservient to the dictates of the Florida legislature. So these are things that are happening in Florida. I know many of you have grown up in Florida and have seen the changes bit by bit, the erosion of individual rights in the state. This, I think, is indicative of where we're headed. Look at the least of us. What is being done to the least of us? And, we're next.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, that was all my questions. Participants, do you have any additional questions you'd like to ask? Okay, well, thank you all viewers and participants for your time. Chuck, thank you so much for giving us this rundown. A special shout out to Lee Perry, who arranged this meeting for us and sent out all the invites and made sure everything ran smoothly, and Ernest, who streamed live for us. Appreciate you all's time and commitment to our environment. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.